In these series of videos on aviation careers, we had the great fortune of chatting to my good friend Tosh Ross about firefighting as a career. And Tosh has highlighted that in that career, there are a number of highly complex situations that you have during a fire. And Tosh is going to share some of those dangers or threats that come up during firefighting and what they, as a company that's very good at this job, do to try and mitigate those threats and make those threats less of a problem in a relatively hostile environment such as firefighting. So Tosh, once again, thanks for joining us. As always, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Great fundi on it. You've done firefighting for how long did you say?
Started doing it in 1992, but not full-time, on and off since 1992 is when I started doing it.
So that's some 30 years of firefighting.
Yeah.
You've done, I think you said last time, 10,000 fire buckets that you've dropped. And
still counting. It's over that. I don't really keep track of all the stuff, but it's enough.
A lot of experience. And during that time, you've really come across probably every situation there is that I can think of at any rate. There may be some that are still will always raise their heads as we go along.
Well, as I say, you never stop learning in this game, and it's so true. With the firefighting, after almost every fire, we'll have a debrief, and people will talk about things, and it's amazing how you discover new stuff. Even in this day and age, you learn little things as you go along, and hopefully, the more you learn, the more chances you have of having a safe outcome.
When we're talking, I asked you if you would highlight some of the threats that you deal with in a firefight, in a helicopter, and what you as a company have done to try and make those threats as manageable as possible.
Okay. Firstly, I would start off by saying the weather. Down here in the Western Cape and up in the Lowveld in the winter season, generally the big fires either starts because of a big wind really makes the fire go out of control, or the winds get up once the fire's going and it becomes absolute chaos. So with the wind, which generally accompanies these things, you have a lot of mechanical turbulence, especially in the mountains down here in the Western Cape. I don't want to go too much detail about mountain flying, but it can get pretty exciting. So with the different types of helicopters we fly the UH-1H and the Black Hawk. So different rotor systems have different limitations, but the Hawk has proved to be an exceptional tool in this environment when we're dealing with these high winds and turbulence. That's one of the threats with the weather. Temperatures is another thing.
But before we move off that threat, what do you guys do in your training and in your planning to reduce that threat as much as possible?
It's actually a very valid question. We can't, it's very hard to simulate the high winds and the turbulence when you're doing initial training or trying to teach a guy how to do this job. So what we do to mitigate that is when we do training, we try and fly with a new guy for about 100 drops supervised. In other words, either myself or one of the more senior guys would go with them in the Huey, especially in the Huey because it's a bit easier. And just to make sure that over the period of 100 drops, you would do probably the region of 5 to 6 hours, which would, in this case could be several different days, different fires, different environments. So you're just assessing his abilities to, look at the risk and look at the weather. So here in the Western Cape, we have normally strong southeasterlies, hot temperatures, low humidities. When you have an appreciation for the weather, and we're talking about sort of the micro Met situation here, with the wind blowing in the mountains, what we do is, the best way I can describe it is imagine what a flow of water would do over the hills. So if you're going to be flying in the lee side of a mountain, which often we end up doing, you're going to encounter some severe turbulence and downdrafts. And you've just got to, if you're aware of them, you can kind of learn how to try and avoid those areas if possible. By using it to your advantage, if you're on an uphill, if the wind's blowing uphill on a slope rather, and you picked up a lot of water, by utilizing the uphill draft on the slope, you can gain an extra rate of climb. So you can get up, if the mountain's on top of the hill, you can use it to your advantage a lot of times. But you need to know, kind of which way the wind's coming from, which is not that difficult because you can see where the smoke is. I think the wind, in general, for firefighting, the wind helps us, from a performance side of the helicopters. The worst time for us is when the wind has died right down and the smoke sits in the valleys. It's going to impair visibility, and especially with the hot temperatures. But we normally only go once the conditions get really bad and the fire's out of control. That's when they call us. So we're not going in with the easy stuff. It's normally with the worst things, and they often expect you to work miracles, which we do try to do that, but it's not that easy. So some days you'll fly until last light, and then you'll come back the next day, first light, and carry on again.
So a simple takeaway from that then is that understanding how winds flow around mountains and over mountains, you know which areas are going to help you and which areas are going to be very turbulent.
Yeah.
And you can fly an according profile, so either trying to avoid it or maybe flying a speed that would be appropriate for the type of
Certainly.
wind that you're sitting with.
And around the Western Cape, I know from just past experience, in the Worcester Valley, I mean, you can take off out of Stellenbosch here and there's almost nowhere, and you get across there and it's blowing a gale. And it's just amazing how, different over a short distance, how quickly the wind can change, both direction and speed. So you've got to be aware of what's going on around you.
But Tosh, just now when you're talking of the wind, you mentioned the fact that it helps either dissipate the smoke or it can infect the smoke. So I'm assuming that smoke could be a very big factor during firefighting in a helicopter. And how does it work and how do you deal with it?
Tell you, first of all, with the smoke, obviously, the thick smoke, as a golden rule, we try and avoid the smoke as far as possible. But every now and again, you might, just through circumstances where you're dropping the load or with the turbulent winds, you might end up having to go through a bit of smoke. So for us to mitigate a threat like that, the trick is just to make sure that you, in a safe way, turn the airplane to get away from the smoke, just get back into the clear air. And, there also comes with all kinds of other effects. Not having visibility ahead of you in the smoke, you don't see any obstacles are there. And the threats that we have, there's two big ones. One is wires, and the other one is what we call the widowmakers, the dead trees, for example, or gum trees that have been left that stick up above the rest of the vegetation. Those can really spoil your day. And when you have these old plantations that haven't been clear-felled properly, more so up in the northern parts of the country than down here, but those are a big issue because they're a light grey colour when the trees, and it blends in with the smoke. They're very difficult to see. So smoke has got, from our own visibility is a problem, but it's the hazards that lie inside there that we can't see. So as I say, as a rule, we avoid the smoke as best we can. So if we can't get onto the fire line, onto the target, then we have to go somewhere else and drop the water a place where we can see. It's it's easier trying to explain it. Each time it's different, and sometimes the wind will change, and you're running into a target, you can see it the next minute, boy, the wind it changes and the smoke obscures it, and you have to just get out of there. So you just got to keep the wings level, climb, get away from the ground.
And then normally, I understand, more than one aircraft operating at a time. What about the visibility of the other airplanes? Is that not a hazard in the smoke?
It is. So around the fire, you're normally aware of, you will be aware of who's flying with you. So when we go to the fires, the Hueys will go always as a pair, and then the Hawk will often go on its own. But there's many times we end up all working together with other machines from other companies. So to mitigate the risk in terms of the visibility, the aircraft that we fly are fitted with the new type strobes on the Hueys. It's a LED strobe. It's really bright. We have these comet flash strobes on the tail for the Hueys. So if the aircraft's going away from you, you can still see the strobes. And when he's sitting at a dam, it's amazing how bright those things are, how they really stick out. The tops of the blades are painted with the red and white flashes, which is Bell calls them a high visibility scheme. So if the aircraft's turning, you'll see the discs, you can pick that up. And then on the Hawk, we have the blades are similar, painted the same way. We have a very, very bright strobe system that's on the underside of the belly and the top of the pylon at the back. And we also have them fitted with these newly fitted LED, I think they call them wigwam lights. They just alternate in the front. So if the aircraft's coming towards you, it's quite visible. And again, you've got this long strop hanging below you with a bright orange bucket. But it's amazing around a fire, late afternoon when the sun's going down and there's smoke and haze. And against the backdrop of the fynbos and stuff, sometimes it can be quite hard to see. So that's where we're trying to mitigate it. Obviously, we talk to each other all the time.
My understanding, the two big mitigations is to know where the other aircraft are, so good situational awareness, and using technology to make the aircraft as visible as possible so you can see the other aircraft in the vicinity of where you operate.
Yeah, I mean, we're operating purely on the principle of see and avoid. That's as simple as that. You just got to be aware of where other guys are. And in general, the fire is reasonably simple. That you're coming off a dam somewhere, you're picking up water, and once you get that pattern, you're going to generally go back to the same dam unless the fire's moved and you find a better dam. So you're running a left or a right-hand pattern, depends where you are. So you kind of know where everybody is in the pattern. So and the Huey's got nice big windows, and so is the Hawk, so you can see. But having said that, yeah, it doesn't eliminate the risk. It's still there.
Situational awareness. Correct. Definitely is.
Yeah.
I imagine that when you fly over a fire like that, it can get fairly warm.
You can. It's hard for people to believe, but some of these big fires, you can fly past them at 200-300 feet. And if you're really close to the fire line, you can feel the heat through the windows, that radiant heat. And I don't no idea what the temperatures are, but it's really hot. And
does that have an effect on the performance of the aircraft and on you as a person through the day?
Yeah, the physiological effects, obviously, with the high temperatures, and you sweat a lot doing this. I mean, we don't have air conditioners in these aircraft, so you drink a lot of water. You take lots of water with you. By the time you land to refuel, the guys on the ground will have water. You drink as much as you can because you really do sweat a lot doing these things. And from the aircraft performance, you can't do much about the ambient temperature, so you're stuck with that. We've never actually looked to see what it would do, with the heat, but it obviously will have an effect. I think what helps us in that regard, once you've got the bucket out of the water, that's where you're going to pull the most power. We actually come right back on the power when we fly at about 50, 60 knots, depending on how we want to affect the drop pattern, and that translates to roughly 50% of the power required, for, you don't need full power to drag the bucket around. So you're not pulling a lot of power at that stage. But if you were to do it in those, right next to fire, I think you'd be quite amazed at, what the effects it would have on the density altitude. I've never even looked at it or calculated that, because for me, is what I do, my own personal way, that once I drop the load, I don't pull much power. I have the energy, I can turn away and just get away from the hot air, and it's actually not really something you consider. It's a fire burning, so your brain's telling you, hey, it's hot there, but we don't measure that. I don't know how you could do it over such a short period. It's such a transient temperature change, but yes, it must have an effect on the performance.
So once again, it's probably situational awareness of it will have an effect on your power and on your physiology, and you've got to be aware of it and try and avoid it as best you can.
Absolutely. So, as I said earlier, you don't go into the smoke, and if you get a fright, I would imagine if you pull a lot of power, you're making big demands on the engine, and our guys have had the compressor stall once, and I think they got a big fright with it. So these aircraft, as old as they are, they're not fitted with auto ignition like the modern stuff with the FADEC. There's no auto relight, there's no ignition override. Even the Hawk doesn't have that either. So if you were to have an engine failure, I think on a single, it becomes a lot more problematic than the Hawk, for example. So yeah, it does have an effect. I mean, the threats are many.
And then finally, for today's episode is, what about oxygen? When you're in and out of that smoke and in that environment, does it have a fatigue effect on you? Does it have a performance effect on the aircraft if you were in the smoke per se?
Well, what we do, the smoke particles are there. So when you've finished after a long day of fire, I mean, your clothes, it smells like an old fireplace, the helicopter, because you've been flying around the smoke and possibly in the smoke at times, and the whole place has kind of got smoke around it. So your clothes smell like that. We've spoken about drinking lots of water, but the aircraft themselves, you'll see the leading edges, they get a lot of that deposits. And what we do, we land, we have these made on landing pads, and we've got water now. So as we land, we'll do pretty much, it's not a compressor wash, we'll just do a rinse. We'll just keep the engine running at idle, and we'll just light spray water into the engine just to wash off the compressor blades, before we shut down. And the aircraft will get cleaned. We have our team guys will get in here and clean them. So we'll make sure that the blades are nice and clean, polish them if we can, because that's where your performance all comes from. So, and you've made comment yourself about how clean these aircraft are, and there's a reason that these are the tools we we use for the job, and we're proud of them, and they do us well. So we look after them, and we just make sure they keep on going.
I'm sure that that must have quite a long period over the fight, should have a fairly significant effect on your performance and your fatigue levels.
It does.
Hot temperature, lack of oxygen, smoke, visibility, concentration.
Yeah, fatigue is definitely a concern, and I think the adrenaline is what keeps you going. But if you just got one fire for the day, you can. And remember now, most times with these fires, it's an emergency. When if it's just a fane boss that's burning, you're not too concerned. Well, you are in a way, but you're trying to put the fire out. But when people's houses and livelihoods are going up in smoke, it's a different thing. So you're doing your best to try and to help those people. So being an emergency, if you need to go a bit longer, yeah, I mean, it's you as the captain of the airplane, you decide what you're going to do. If you're trying to help somebody, I mean, especially if there's life and limb, in jeopardy here. So I think it doesn't happen all the time, but it has happened before where you've just got to go that extra mile. If you can help, if you're saving someone's life or whatever, that's a different story. There's no limit on how much you can try and do. Obviously within reason. You don't want to end up going to places where you're going to get yourself into trouble. And I say we don't do firefighting at night. We don't have the ability to do that. But the Hawk is fully NVG configured. It came like that. But we don't. I've never used the goggles. I don't think it's something that would ever be worthwhile pursuing in this country, as opposed to we saw the big fires in California recently. I mean, they've got some amazing technology there, and we just don't have access to that. I think our environment is it's not a requirement, and I don't ever see that happening, to be honest. I mean, I could well be wrong, but for the daylight operations that we do, day VFR, I mean, it works for us. Yeah.
So Tosh, it's really amazing. I mean, there's things here that I have never even thought about or heard of, not having done any of this type of work.
Yeah.
And that's really enlightening. And we have spoken, we'll do maybe a few more series discussing other threats. But if we were to take one or two single reps, so we know about a whole lot of threats, but there's no good knowing about them unless we're going to do something to try and minimize them. So in summary, what are the maybe two takeaways that the great company you work for, Leading Edge, employ as processes to reduce the threat?
Firstly, training. We pride ourselves on doing a job as best we can. We've never really, I think we've had, in terms of dispatch reliability, I don't know, I got up to 99%. We had one problem this year with the Hawk, the starter, the one starter, the shaft sheared. So that was changed within about an hour and a half. It was changed. It was back online again. So apart from that, mechanical reliability, you could pretty much call it 100% record. For the crew, we do regular training. We debrief after every fire. We will employ methods of constructive criticism rather than just criticizing a guy for the sake of it. But we're very like a little family here. The people that come and do this are chosen for their ability to fit in with the rest. The ethos that we have is we've got a job to do, and we do it as best we can. We're trying to stay away from all the other sort of interference and noise that's out there. So we're not here to do charters or other things like that. We just come and do firefighting, and it's because we love doing it. It's and hopefully that shows. We had lots of compliments, but I mean, we've discussed a bunch of things here in terms of threats and so on, and it kind of it leads me to wonder where we're going to be, down the road, where people want to come and do this kind of work. And maybe I think your series is going to be a good thing, Terry, to try and explain I don't say the pitfalls, but it's not always what it seems. People only see the good side when the choppers are flying and water's getting dropped here and all these things happening, but it's the sitting around in the background stuff. As we speak now, we're doing an engine change on one of the aircraft. It'll be finished. It went in yesterday and started. So within 72 hours, we've changed the engine. It'll be back online. We've got a spare aircraft again. So it wasn't, we just moved some aircraft around. So we've got 3 Hueys here and the Hawk. So I think we're in good shape to tackle any fires when they come, as long as they call us in time.
Thanks, Tosh.
Pleasure,
Very,
Terry.
very interesting. We'll see you soon on the next series.
Terry, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Okay.